Hey scholars, this is a video explaining the application paper assignment. Please make sure that you're looking at that assignment document, specifically that you've read through it before you're watching this video. It'll help you make more sense out of what I'm talking about. So, um, the application paper is a writing experience and writing opportunity for you to apply a course concept to one of your own communication experiences. So, you'll basically be writing about a concept or theory, describing that, and then providing an application of that theory or concept to a life experience that you've had. I call it a communication experience. Basically, you can write about any sort of significant life experience that you've had, something that's ongoing, like an ongoing uh, thing or an ongoing experience that you have. It could be something that you've experienced in the past. It could be related to a relationship that you have, a family relationship, a friend relationship, a workplace relationship, something that happened within sports or within school, any sort of unique and significant communication experience that's relevant for this assignment. So um, the paper needs to be at least 2 pages, no more than 4. So you should aim for 3. If your paper were to be 8 pages, I will not read 8 pages. Basically, I don't read any more than 4. 2 would be the absolute bare minimum. It'd be, I'll say this, it'd be very difficult to effectively write this paper in only 2 pages. It's possible, but that's why I give like a minimum of at least 2 pages. If you're extremely concise and to the point and you hit all the parameters of the assignment, then that's great. You don't need to write more. You definitely want to be using Times New Roman 12-point font, 1-inch margins, double spaced. So the writing guideline of 2 to 4 pages is based on the fact that you would be having 12-point font Times New Roman, 12-point font with 1-inch margins. If you had 16-point font with 1.5-inch margins, then a 3-page paper is not a 3-page paper according to these standards. It would, think about word count too. I'm not concerned with word count, but bottom line, 2 to 4 pages. The writing should be formal. Excuse me. It's a formal paper, so you want to be following proper grammar, proper language rules. You want to make sure you proofread. The grading is holistic. I mean, I have this writing prompt here, and I'll be going through it. So grading is based on content, clarity, and expression. It's a function of style, spelling, grammar, etc. Make sure you spell check, grammar check, and address all prompts of the writing guidelines, and make sure you thoroughly proofread. It's best what some experts say and who are in writing careers, they say it's best to print out a document. So even if you have a few drafts and you've proofread and all that kind of stuff, prior to submitting it, it's good to print it out and have a physical hard copy, and then look through it and look for errors and whatnot. The cleaner it looks, the higher the the higher the likelihood that you'll catch errors and proofreading errors and even content errors too. So here are the guidelines for the paper. Basically, my advice to you is to follow this exactly as you see it laid out. I've been doing this type of paper. I've modified the parameters of this style of paper over the last 18 years. But my advice to you, follow this exact guideline, these exact guidelines, and then you should be all set to go. So think of it like there's 5 parts to the paper. There's the introduction, background, concept, theory, application, and then conclusion. So the very first thing that you're doing in the paper is introducing. You have some sort of an attention getter related to the assignment to draw in the reader, provide a brief statement about why you chose the topic, and then a preview statement of what the reader can expect. So that's just your introductory paragraph, very short, maybe 4 lines or something like that, a few sentences. And that's one paragraph. And then a new paragraph, the background. That could be all one paragraph. You could have a half-page paragraph, that's fine, assuming that it all is flowing together and it makes sense. So the background is the background of what's going on. You're providing a detailed description about the context of your life experience, communication experience, what happened, who was involved, and when the event occurred. So you're kind of giving me sort of a play-by-play, just the background context of what I'm about to be reading about. So you're not yet talking about the theory or concept. You're not yet doing the application. You're not integrating any sort of course concepts. You're just providing a context for the experience that you're about to write about. I'd say half page maximum. I emphasize that because sometimes in this paper, some students will write a page and a half to 2 pages about the background and very little to very little substance at all about the concept or theory or application. And those papers tend to get D's and F's, or D at best. You're just giving me a context, right, of what happened. That's the background, part 2. Part 3, that's where you're providing a detailed explanation of a concept or theory. You will choose one concept. There's a few concepts and a few theories. I'm going to go through those in just a minute. Those are all listed on page 2 of this assignment document. So once you select your topic, your concept or theory, you're just going to use the textbook as the primary source from where you got the information. You don't need to do text in-text source citations because it's from the textbook. I know the textbook. I'm aware of what's in the textbook. So you don't need to provide credit, even though most assignments like this typically would require you to do an in-text source citation. I'm telling you, you don't need to, because I know the book that it's coming from, and I'm quite familiar with the book. However, if you do use an outside source, if you think that your concept or theory needs more information than what's in the textbook, that's okay. You can use that, but I don't think it's necessary, because the concepts and theories that are available, you should not. There's no requirement. There's no need to look at an outside source, because everything that you need would be within the textbook and what was discussed in the class and any notes that you took from the PowerPoint and lecture, etc. So for the concept theory, you're going to use your textbook, and you're providing a detailed, thorough, comprehensive explanation of that concept, of that theory, using your own words. Of course, the textbook has examples, and some of the language is going to overlap. But most importantly, I want to see that you demonstrate that you understand it using your own voice, your own hypothetical illustrations, etc. You're not applying anything. You're not talking about the way that concept is related to your experience. That's in the application section. So for the concept theory portion, part 3, that should be about a page long. You're providing a very detailed explanation, and that should demonstrate the degree to which you understand that. By me reading it, I should know, okay, this student definitely understands this concept theory based upon the explanation as it relates to the textbook. That's part 3. Part 4 is the application. That also should be about a page. So obviously the concept part and the application part are the 2 biggest parts. This part holds the greatest importance. This is the kind of the so what of the assignment. This is like the reason why you're doing it, other than the fact that it's an assignment. This is the application to your own personal experience, where you gain that knowledge and insight of like, oh, okay, this is how my life experience relates to this thing in the textbook that we're talking about. So, now that with the way that the paper would go is like, okay, you've introduced the paper, you've given a background, a context, you provided the theory. Now you're going to give a description of what happened, and you're going to give a description of the illustration. You're providing a detailed illustration, where the writing that you're providing is exemplifying the way that the theory or concept exemplifies your own personal experience. So here's some questions to address. 1, explain how that theory illustrates your experience. So like, how do the 2 match up? How are those 2 things related, right? You want to provide specific and detailed examples in your analysis. So if it's something like social exchange theory and you're using the terminology like rewards and costs and relational outcome, you're talking now. You're like integrating the 2. You're talking about the theory. You're borrowing word language and concepts from the theory or the concept, and you're integrating them into, you're applying them to your experience. That's what's called an application. You want to have like very specific and detailed examples. It's not like you have to have 20 examples, but a one page worth, right? It should be concise and specific. Concise means doesn't necessarily mean short. It means brief but comprehensive. So concise means you're covering a lot of information in a way that's brief, right? It's like being efficient with your writing. Another component to that is the question, why was it useful to utilize the specific concept theory you chose to illustrate your experience? In other words, of all the theories that you could have chosen, you chose the one that you chose. So why do you think that one? I mean, this is not like a one correct answer type of a question, but it's almost like you're making an argument for why you think that this particular concept or theory was a useful way to illustrate your experience. There's no one correct answer for that. But again, this is a way for your voice to be heard, not just you reading something in a textbook and then you're summarizing in a paper. Wow, this is an opportunity to share your voice. What do you think, right? This is where you're talking about, you're articulating your thoughts. That's the application part, most important part. I emphasize that a lot because in the past, sometimes the students, they have an application section that's, a fifth of a page, and it's like 2 sentences, and then again D's and F's. So I'm giving you advice for how to write the best possible paper. That's what I'm doing. Okay, last part is the conclusion. That should be about roughly 1/3 to 1/2 of a page. These are not exact page parameters, but just guidelines. If your introduction was 1.5 pages and your background was 3 pages and the concept was 1/6 of a page, yeah, you're gonna have some problems. So these are guidelines. It doesn't have to be exact. The conclusion should be more than a sentence. Should be about 1/3 to 1/2 of a page. Now you're providing a summary of the whole paper by reviewing and synthesizing your experience and what you talked about, in terms of the concept theory. You're not just rewriting what you already wrote. You're providing a synthesis. For example, you can comment on the general insights that you've gained from analyzing your experience, like, hey, this is what I learned. I never really thought about this before, but here's what I learned. That second part is provide a brief discussion or commentary on the degree to which this writing experience helped you perceive a particular life relationship in a different way. So you have some general insights, like I never really thought about analyzing a relationship this way before, and here's what it did for me, right? The second part is more specific to like a specific relationship. Like after having done this writing analysis, it's going to change the way that I interact with such and such a person, or I have a completely different perspective on this relationship I had, or this experience that I had as an athlete, or whatever the case is. But yeah, that's the conclusion, right? You're synthesizing things, you're providing your takeaways, your insights, right? That's roughly 1/3 to 1/2 a page. So make sure you submit the assignment by the deadline. It has to be a Word or PDF document. If it's a Google Doc or a Pages doc or some other sort of document, in all likelihood it won't work. In all likelihood it won't work, and then if it's not submitted by the deadline or the late deadline, which as you know is Wednesday. So the deadline is Sunday the 22nd, and then I allow for a few days extra for a late deadline, which would be Wednesday I guess that's the 25th. If you don't do it correctly, then in all likelihood it'll just be a 0. So make sure you don't get a 0. Assuming that you don't want a 0, just make sure that you submit the assignment correctly. If you're doing the work, if you're going to spend all the time and effort that it takes to write something like this, please make sure that you're submitting it correctly. Don't email it to me. I won't accept an emailed document. If you just include it as an attachment in the comment section of Canvas, that won't work. It has to be submitted properly to the proper module, because then it will be ran through Turnitin. So if it's not done that way, then it's just, in general, for lack of a better term, it's not good for you. Okay, so the options to choose from, page 2. So I I overemphasize the fact that you're only going to choose one concept from one of the following chapters. Why? Because for some reason, even though I say you only choose one concept, some students will pull multiple concepts. They write about like 6 different things. Not really sure why, but I've had that happen quite a bit over the years. So really want to overemphasize that you're only writing one concept from one of the following chapters. 3, 4, 6, 5, or 8. So we've covered all those, and by the time that you're writing this, we will have talked through all those chapters. So let's just say you were to choose self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is in chapter 3. Within self-efficacy, that's like a whole section of the chapter that has to do with assessing your own abilities. It has to do with self and self-esteem and self-concept. We talked a lot about the nature of self. Within that section in the textbook, there's obviously self-efficacy, there's communication apprehension, and then self-fulfilling prophecy. We talk about all those things. So within your paper, if you were to choose that one, you would talk about all those. Chapter 4 is communication accommodation theory. The authors talk about that theory. There's roughly about a page worth of explanation of that theory. But as you know, we talked about that a good deal in class. We talked about it, we spent a good amount of time talking about it. I addressed it in class. Chapter 5, the option would be vocalizations or paralanguage vocalics. Even though this was the lecture video online for chapter 5 on nonverbal communication, aside from that, I talked about the nature of vocalics quite a bit in class. I've mentioned it on a number of occasions because it's relevant to so many components of communication. So that would be the option for chapter 5. Chapter 6 is there's 2 options. One is you can choose the high and low context communication style. So the authors distinguish between what it means to be a high context communicator versus a low context communicator. You would write about, if you choose that, you'd write about both of them. What does that mean? What does it look like? And then, of course, you'd have to have the analysis or the application to your own experience. Option 2 from chapter 6 would be collectivist and individualist orientations. So some people sort of, there's 2 different types of, let's say, cultures. There's collectivistic cultures or collectivist cultures and individualist cultures, orientations. Same kind of difference in this regard. So if you chose that, you would talk about both and then provide an application of the degree to which one or both of those are relevant or related to your experience. You would probably write about both, in which ways it's collectivist and which ways it's individualist. And then the last chapter with options to choose from would be chapter 8, which is, there's 3 options: the social exchange theory, strategic topic avoidance, and repair tactics. So we talked extensively about social exchange theory in class, and then we also talked about strategic topic avoidance in class, and not a whole lot about repair tactics. Nevertheless, all of these are explained in the textbook. So there's a good variety of options to choose from. One thought is, one of the first things that you could do would be a really easy thing before you even started any writing. Go and review every single one of these concepts and theories, review it in your notes and the textbook, and then sort of maybe be asking yourself, like, okay, which one kind of sticks out to me? Which one makes me feel like writing about in a paper? That's one option. Another option could be starting out. You can either start out doing that first, or the second option is you start out by brainstorming about the thing that you want to write about. Maybe right now you're thinking, I know exactly what I'm going to write about. Choose wisely. You should choose a life experience, communication experience that's significant enough that's going to be the substance of this paper. It should be something that you're willing to share in a paper. I'm the only one who reads it. Something that is significant and meaningful. It could be something that's challenging, and you might write. A lot of students tend to write about things that were a negative experience, and they're using one of these concepts to help them sort of process and understand and get insight on this experience that they had. Maybe it was years ago, maybe it was last week, right? It could be a positive thing. It could be a neutral thing. So think thoroughly about what you want to write about. You could brainstorm too, life experiences. You could say, as an athlete, as a sister, as a brother, as a friend, or in school or at work or something like that, and then start getting some ideas. So that's that. So choose one of those. I give you some insight on that bottom of that page 2. It just says communicating with the dark side. That's just to give you an idea of what the format should look like, where you indent, right, the first line of a paragraph, you indent that, double spaced, right? You have a 1-inch margins and so on and so forth. So I'm not too much of a stickler about format. If you're used to using, let's say, MLA or Chicago style or AP or a different kind of format other than Times New Roman, if you're already familiar with it and that's your dominant one or your preferred method of a style, then go ahead and use that. The most important thing is that it's formal, that it's neat and clean and orderly and all that kind of stuff. So you don't need you only need a reference page if you include an outside source. If you don't include an outside source and you're only using the textbook and then class notes and lectures and stuff like that, then you don't need any kind of a references page or bibliography or works cited, because I already know what that is, right? I'm the one grading it. I'm the one teaching from this textbook, so I don't need that. The only time you would include one is if it's an outside source. I have a couple of student samples in this same module from the same assignment. That's pretty much the same assignment that I've done in the past. I recommend that you read through those to give you an idea. They're not perfect papers, but they're pretty good papers. I mean, I would say they're really good papers. One of them has a reference where you'll see the reference is not the textbook, it's some other reference. And the only downside for that is that that particular student failed to have in-text source citations from that. Nevertheless, other than that one thing, it was a great paper, and that's why I'm including it. But just do know and make sure that if you are using an outside source, that you provide in-text source citations. And any questions that you have, feel free to ask in class, or you can email me or ask me in person. But if you have a question about this paper, I recommend that you ask it in class, because whatever you're thinking, if you ask it in class, chances are someone else in the class might be thinking the same thing, or at the very least, they'll benefit from hearing you ask that question and then hearing the answer to that question. I give you a list of expectations for your paper here. Things to be mindful of, don't justify the text. There should be a line left. Don't turn in a first draft. So a lot of this is like writing stuff and making sure that you're doing things correctly and properly. As again, I'll emphasize this again. The paper, that last one, number 12, the paper it must be submitted properly in Canvas so it can be checked to turn it in. If it's not, it will not be considered for grading. So please don't do that, because if you write the paper, chances are, if you write the paper and then you don't do things correctly, chances are it'll just be a 0. That's not good. Okay, so that is the application paper. Hope you're all doing great. Talk to you later.